I'm 19 years old, married, no degree, no 9 to 5.
Over and over again, we see this pattern of lovely young women becoming feminists and coming out the other side with piercings and shaved heads and gaining like 50 pounds. That's what happens whenever you aren't following the truth. Whenever you're being influenced in demonic ideologies, you start looking like a demon. It's okay to be lovely and pretty and beautiful and happy. You don't have to be ugly and overweight with a shaved head to be safe.
I am girlfriend, and everyone loves to comment that I'm one argument away from homelessness. But I feel like everybody is one argument away from homelessness. You can get in an argument with your boss, and then you can lose your job. You can get an argument with your parents, they could cut you off.
I'm Tori. I am a 21-year-old wife and mom, and yes, I got married and had my baby at 20 years old. Yes, I stay at home with our son while my husband goes out and provides for us all day. Yes, I believe in getting married and having children young if you are able to. No, I don't have a college degree or a backup plan if my husband leaves me, but if that happens, I will figure it out, although I think that getting married young, you're just betting on the person that you love, and I trust him, so no, I will probably never work another day in my life, and I am happy about that.
Husband of 24 years that abandoned his family. And after 24 years of being a trad wife at age 44, I found myself with absolutely nothing.
I'm 37. I've been a stay-at-home mom for the past 10 plus years.
My ex sent me a message that said, as always, I'll make sure our children don't go without. And yeah, he's right, as always, because I haven't worked and he's always paid for everything. So of course, he's always been the one to not make them go without. And how easily he can just make me feel like I'm this big again. I don't really understand.
The sourdough is rising, the kids are playing in the sun, and the house all spotless. It looks like peace, does it not? But there is a silent invoice attached to this aesthetic that nobody in the whimsical floral dresses is talking about. And we have all seen the young tradwife trend that is literally taking over our feeds, be it on TikTok, on Instagram, it is everywhere. And now it is being marketed as the ultimate return to femininity and a soft life. I put that in quotes. But personally, as somebody who looks at life through the lens of financial literacy, I really do not buy into this entire cottagecore vision, or rather dream. I see an economic gamble where the house, the provider, always wins. And the woman, the gambler, is left with nothing. No retirement plan, no safety net, no career, and no work experience. Today, we are going to do the math that the trade influencers are not doing. We're going to talk about the motherhood penalty that lasts a lifetime. And we're also going to be talking about why a man is not a plan, is not just a cliche. It's rather a survival strategy. And of course, the terrifying reality of what happens to a trade wife when the happily ever after hits a financial wall. By the end of this video, I promise you, you will understand why the trade wife life is not just a lifestyle choice. Because for many women, it can become a financial trap. And if you have been feeling that something about this trend feels off, well, you're not alone, because my comment section has been buzzing your concerns about the provider myth and, of course, financial dependence. So let's pull back the curtain on the economics of the aesthetics. I'm Amanda, and let's get into the numbers.
Where you live has a major impact on your financial situation. This chart compares major American cities and what the burden of living there looks like financially. It assumes here in the middle column that you follow the 30% rule, which means you're not spending more than 30% of your income in order to rent.
The official 2026 U.S. income classes have been announced. This is based off of household income, so if you live in a multi-income household, you would add both incomes together to see where you land. After hearing this data, let me know if you ended up where you expected, or were you pleasantly or unpleasantly surprised. Starting with the lower income ranges, wages, those in poverty are making less than $15,961. Those in near poverty are making between $15,961 and $31,920. And those in lower class are making between $31,921 and $55,820. Lower middle class is those making between $55,821 and $83,730. But true middle class is those making between $83,731 and $125,595. By the way, if you stayed this long, please make sure to hit that follow button. Back to it with the upper middle class, which is those making between $125,596 and $167,460. And finally, the upper class is those making above $167,000.
Let's start with the first myth, that the only thing standing between a woman and this lifestyle is finding the right provider, because the reality is much more complicated. A single income household is not just one person earning money. It means one person's income has to support the entire family's present and future. And in 2026, that reality has become much harder, because the housing costs have increased, healthcare costs have increased, education costs have also increased. Everyday expenses, from groceries to transportation, they all have become more expensive. And for many families, wages have not increased at the same pace as the cost of maintaining a comfortable lifestyle. So when people ask, why don't women just stay back at home? The question that we need to ask in turn is, on what income? Because staying at home isn't the absence of a financial decision. It is a financial decision on its own. Someone still has to fund the emergencies, the retirement, future goals, children's needs, the healthcare. The invoice doesn't disappear. It simply moves onto another person. And that takes us to the next point that I want us to talk about, the rich provider reality.
To all the girls wondering if you should get married young, you can choose a college degree, or you can choose Chanel. Choose wisely.
You know what? Call me a hater. I think this is so funny. According to this new Wired article, apparently wealthy tech bros and CEOs are paying matchmakers anywhere from $25,000 to $100,000 to find them a tradwife. Yep, you heard that right. And their wish lists are absolutely crazy, and I really want to talk about it because they want someone younger, because of course they do. They want her to be from the Midwest, despite not being from the Midwest themselves.
This is where the math becomes uncomfortable. To live the tradwife lifestyle that is being portrayed online, you don't just need a provider, you need a rich provider, because there's a huge difference between surviving on one income and thriving on one income. The version of this lifestyle that gets millions of views online often comes with financial freedom. The freedom for one person to step away from paid employment, the freedom to absorb unexpected expenses, the freedom to save even for the future, the freedom to not panic even when something goes wrong. And that type of freedom usually requires a household income far above average. The uncomfortable truth is that many people are trying to recreate a wealthy lifestyle without wealthy income. And that is where the danger begins. There's another layer to this conversation. We spoke previously on this channel about how wealth is becoming a performance, and social media has created a wealth where financial security or financial performance can also become a performance, because many of the women creating tradwife content are not simply homemakers. They are entrepreneurs, they are content creators, they are editors, they are marketers. They understand branding and audience psychology. The irony is that some of the biggest examples of women that appear to not need money are actually making more money by showing people that they do not need money. Of course, the audience only sees the lifestyle, but behind the lifestyle is actually a running business. It is a business model, and the dependency itself is becoming the product that is being sold to you.
Your husband is such a great provider, and you've totally cracked the code on how to live well as a woman because he pays all the bills and feminism ruined everything for us. Then Why does it say paid partnership at the bottom of your post?
This is the most insidious part of these tradwife influencers, is they're not even tradwives. They are not dependent on their husbands. They have their own money from influencing us to want to be tradwives. But they've found a way around the worst part of being a tradwife, the part that made us rebel against being a tradwife and go get our own jobs, which is tradwives are dependent on their husbands because they make all the money and we do all of the unpaid labor. They are getting paid for their labor, for selling you the aspirational life of being a tradwife, while other people do the labor behind the scenes that make that aspirational, soft, easy life possible. They have childcare we never see. They probably have assistants and managers. The lifestyle of a true tradwife is completely dependent on whether or not their husband wants to keep them around. But these tradwife influencers, if they're good at their job, are very, very financially secure on their own. And something that bothers me so much is this tradwife content, which is very intentionally trying to sell us a reality that just does not exist, is creating tradwife light content, which I kind of think of it as, which is just normal, everyday people, younger women mostly, making these videos that are like, why did we ever want to work? Why wouldn't I just want to stay home and cook and clean and take care of the kids? Which is fine. But the tradwife content is propaganda to get you to think that that is an easy, soft, leisurely, safe life. It is none of those things, unless you join the pyramid scheme and start selling the lie of the easy, comfortable, worry-free, secure life of the tradwife to other impressionable women.
Nara Smith getting backlash for promoting this tradwife aesthetic, right? She posted this Mother's Day post about how she started having kids at 18 and now she has 5 kids. And she rightfully got pushback because people were like, you push this aesthetic, but you're not actually living it because you are a very wealthy model. And I left this comment that says, the fact that they're ridiculously rich and push this quote tradwife aesthetic. Meanwhile, she's a full-time influencer wearing couture and definitely has nannies. Who's watching the kids when they're filming? Girl, bye. I have gotten so many comments from people that are like, she's not a tradwife. She's actually a model. That's why she wears couture. Why do you care who's watching the kids? Do you want them in the videos? Reading comprehension on 0.
But okay, even if we remove social media, there is still a big financial risk that cannot be ignored right there. Dependence on one income. In finance, diversification is one of the most basic principles. You do not put all your money in one investment. It's not wise to put all your eggs in one basket. So in the same manner, you do not rely on one source of income. You instead actually create protection for uncertainty. But in a single income household, the family's financial survival depends entirely on one person's ability to continue earning. And providers are human. They can lose their jobs, they can become sick, they can face disability, they can experience burnout. Their industry can change. In a 2-income household, if one person falls, the other person can become the safety net. But in a household where one person carries everything, if that person falls, the entire family feels the impact. That is not protection, that is extreme financial vulnerability.
I just got laid off.
A lot more people in the Bay Area are losing their jobs. Another round of layoffs for Meta. That means Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp.
In 2025 alone, nearly 250,000 people lost their jobs, which is about 674 people per day.
Now let's talk about the cost that is the least visible, the cost of stepping away from your career, ladies. Because oftentimes when people talk about leaving the workforce, they usually calculate the most obvious number. I won't be earning a salary for those years, but that is only the first number. The real cost is everything that salary could have built. A career is not just a paycheck. A career is an asset. It creates earning potential. It builds professional relationships. It increases your future opportunities. It gives you access to retirement contributions and benefits. It even creates a financial identity outside of your relationship. So when someone steps away from the workforce for 5 years, they are not simply losing 5 years of income. They are potentially losing 5 years of raises, 5 years of promotions, 5 years of retirement contributions, 5 years where their earning potential could have grown. And this is where financial literacy matters. Because wealth is not built only by what you earn today, it is built by what you're able to compound over time. A 5-year gap early in your career can seem temporary, but financially, those years can have a ripple effect that lasts for decades. The money you don't invest cannot compound. The promotions you don't receive cannot build on each other. The experience you do not gain cannot increase your future earning power. And this is why a career break is not just a lifestyle decision, but is rather a financial decision.
How are people almost tripling their salary in 3 years? Why don't you ask me? Because I can tell you.
I went from intern to director in just under 5 years, and a lot of people think that it's just because I worked hard, but it's actually because of these 3 things.
And this brings us to another reality that economists have studied for years, the motherhood penalty. Now, the motherhood penalty describes the economic disadvantage that women can experience after having children. This can happen through career breaks, reduced working hours, being passed over for promotions, or being placed on a slower career track. And let us be clear, raising children is valuable work. It requires time, it requires patience, it requires emotional labor. But the economy doesn't always reward unpaid caregiving in the same way it rewards paid employment. That sucks, I'll admit. As a woman, this is heartbreaking. But that means a woman can spend years doing something incredibly important while simultaneously falling behind financially. And remember, this can also happen to career women. Now imagine what happens when you take a complete break. Because this phenomenon that I'm talking about is not just for tradwives. This happens to career women as well. Those shorter breaks that they take after maternity leaves and, the demands of running a household with children, they still affect their careers. Now imagine what that would look like for a woman who has completely moved away from the workforce for more than 5 years.
The motherhood penalty is so much more than just the wage gap. This person here says, I have a master's degree in healthcare field. I had to be a stay-at-home mom because of the price of childcare. And unfortunately for women like this, oftentimes it is incredibly difficult to get back into the workforce. There's this narrative that we tell women, hey, you can leave the workforce while your kids are young, raise your own kids, avoid the cost of daycare, and you can just come back later. But you want to know what the reality is for so many women? Is that they do this. They stay home with their kids for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, maybe. Depends on how long you have kids home with you and the age gaps that you might have. But say it's only 5 years. You leave the workforce for 5 years, you send your kid on the bus to kindergarten, and you try to get a job. Nobody is going to pay you what you're worth. Nobody is going to care that you have a master's degree. Nobody cares that you have a bachelor's degree. Nobody cares if you have a doctorate. You've been out of the workforce for 5 years. So now we are setting you back to zero. You know what's crazy? As a working mom in 2025, one of the #1 pieces of advice that I have received is to never mention my kids in a job interview. And people give this advice for good reason.
But perhaps the biggest misconception is that you can leave and return whenever you please. That your career will just be waiting for you exactly where you left it. Unfortunately, careers do not act like a pause button. And I think we touched on this phenomenon when we were talking about influencers returning to 9-to-5s. Industries change, technology changes, companies change. The skills that were valuable 5 years ago may not be the skills that employers value today. And when women often attempt to return after a very long pause, they face what is known as a re-entry penalty. They may have to even accept roles that are way below their previous level, having to prove yourself all over again. Because while you were creating stability at home, unfortunately, the professional world was still moving forward. And this then leads us to one of the biggest contradictions of the tradwife conversation. A lifestyle marketed as security can sometimes create dependency. Because what is your safety net if the only thing protecting you is another person? Love is important, marriage is important, Partnership is important, but your entire financial future cannot exist only through someone else's ability to provide. Because a person can change. A person's circumstances can change. A person's ability to provide can also change. And this is why I will always on this hill. A person is not a financial strategy. A partner can be your safety net, but they should never be your only safety net. We talk about providers as if they're permanent, like they are a guarantee, like nothing could ever interrupt their ability to earn. But providers are human. They get laid off, they get sick, they may experience burnout. They also face unexpected financial pressures. When your entire family's survival depends on one person's income, you are not only trusting their character, you are trusting their health, their employer, their industry, and circumstances completely outside of their control. And that is a lot of risk placed on just but one person.
So last week my husband got fired after being back for like a week and a half after having like a major surgery. We're in New York, and I mean, it's giving not legal. I'm just a simpleton, I guess, and I'm just like, I would never, like, if I had an employee and like they just came back from having major surgery and like the doctor says that I'll be good in like 6 weeks and I'm still within the 6 weeks.
So I'm one of 8,000 people that just got laid off from Meta, and it's a weird feeling. I've been working for literally the past 15 years straight since I graduated college.
It's been nearly 6 months since I lost my job, and here are some things that I've learned over the past 6 months.
And then there's a conversation that nobody wants to have. The D word, divorce. Now, I know it doesn't fit the fantasy, it doesn't fit the cottagecore dream, but financial planning requires us to look at the reality, not the best case scenario. I mean, you're free to call me a pessimist, like my mom and my partner do, but the reality is relationships can end. People can change, and circumstances can certainly change. And for a woman who has spent years outside the workforce, divorce is not just an emotional crisis. It can easily become a financial crisis as well. Because starting over at 30 is different from starting over at 50, which is different from starting over at 40.
So y'all want to know the scariest thing, and it's happening to me now, is being a female, married. I'm 37. I have 2 kids. They're 5 and 7, and I've been a stay-at-home mom for the past 10 plus years. I have no income. I have no money. I use my husband's credit card and I use my husband's money. And 2 weeks ago, he told me that he wants to move forward with divorce. Today, I use an American Express credit card for everything. It's got my name on it, but obviously he pays the bill. He told me he's gonna cut it off, and I gotta like move all the automatic payments and stop using it. And he said, you need to start using your own card now. What card? I don't have a card. That is my card. Terrifying. I mean, I feel like a little girl who needs their mommy because I don't know how to take care of myself.
At that point, it had been just a little bit over a year since my husband of 24 years had abandoned his family. And after 24 years of being a trad wife at age 44, I found myself with absolutely nothing. 3 days after my marriage ended, I went to Trader Joe's to buy some groceries for me and the kids. And I had a $43 grocery bill. I had 2 little paper bags of Trader Joe's groceries. And I swiped my card on a bank account that should have had about $250,000 in it. And it had 0. It was declined. I drove to the bank to find out that my husband had taken everything out. He had withdrawn everything. There was absolutely nothing that I could do about it because I had only been on his bank account for about 2 months. It was part of our reconciliation package agreement after being separated for 3 years. And I was just listed as a secondary, so he could close down the account, take all the money, and do whatever he wanted without my permission at all. So I drove to the Gilbert DES to see if I could get food stamps or welfare or anything. And I had so much money going through my bank account that they wouldn't approve me for anything. I told them my husband just left me, but we hadn't filed for divorce. There was absolutely nothing to prove that we weren't still cohabitating. He wouldn't sign anything.
I just saw a creator ask where all the former Tradwives were. And maybe some of the ones that went to college for their MRS degree got married as children and had, 5 kids in 7 years. The ones who learned to sew and darn and cook everything from scratch. The ones who wore dresses and made sure their hair was fully done and their full face of makeup was on before their husband got home from work.
I was a trad wife. I was married for almost 2 decades. And here's a few things I want to say about this topic. So if you are thinking about being basically a stay-at-home mom and not making any money during the time that your kids are little, or maybe the entirety of it, or being a stay-at-home wife, I want you to think about that 40 to 50% of marriages end in divorce. So that's a really high statistic. So you have basically a 1 in 2 chance that this isn't going to work. And then for second marriages, it's a 60% chance. Then I want you to ask yourself these questions. So what are you going to do if he cheats? And I'm not saying this was the situation in my marriage, but
starting over after years of building a career is not the same as starting over after years of being away from the workforce. And this is why financial independence is not about expecting your relationship to fail. It is about protecting yourself in case life does something unexpected. And this brings us to the conversation that is the most uncomfortable: power dynamics. I know you trust your person, but the reality is financial dependence can shift the dynamics inside a relationship. Because when one person controls all the income, they have more control over financial decisions. And for some women, asking for money can slowly become asking for permission. All I'm saying is true security is not needing to leave. True security is having the ability to leave if you ever need to. Because having options does not weaken a relationship. It actually strengthens the relationship. You know, the I want you instead of I need you to survive kind of situation. The problem with the Tradwife content as it is being marketed online is not the femininity. Neither is it the homemaking. It is the idea that dependence is the same as security. Because sometimes what looks like a soft life from the outside can feel like an expensive cage from the inside. You know that entire idiom of an expensive cage, a golden cage, and a parrot inside. So let me be clear on this one. The video is not saying that women should not stay home. It isn't also saying that every household requires 2 incomes. Neither is it saying that there is anything wrong with valuing motherhood, family, or homemaking. The question isn't whether a woman chooses to stay at home. The question is whether she has financially protected herself while making that choice. You can love your partner, you can build a beautiful family, you can choose a traditional lifestyle, and you can still have savings in your own name. You can still invest, you can still understand your finances, you can still build your own safety net. There is nothing cute about being a damsel in distress when it comes to the well-being of your own life and your children's life. Because the real soft life is not when you don't have financial responsibility. The real soft life is when you have options, in my own opinion. I mean, the freedom to stay because you want to, not because you have nowhere else to go. Because at the end of the day, a person can love you, a person can support you, a person can build a life with you. But still, a person is not a financial strategy. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think the modern Tradwife lifestyle is a realistic choice for most women today? Or do you think that social media has turned a traditional arrangement into a luxury fantasy? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you subscribe for more deep dives into the economics of our digital culture. I'm Amanda Spice, and I will see you in the next one.